Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is doing great. It is so wonderful to be able to learn together once again after a 1-week hiatus. This morning, we are going to be studying chapter 52 of Sefer Tehillim as we continue our march through the book of Tehillim. Baruch Hashem, our Tehillim Shirim are inspiring people and elevating people's both the saying of Tehillim and when it connects to the davening that we're able to say on a regular basis. And so I hope it resonates with you. I know, as I say frequently, how much it is able to resonate with me as well. Let me just put the recording on. And okay, so again, we are studying chapter 52 of Tehillim. And this chapter of Tehillim is really broken up into three parts. The first part is the first two psukim, which is really the introduction to it all. Psukim 3 through 7 is characterized as a rebuke of a person who puts all of his faith in his own might, his own strength, in his own capabilities, his own wealth. And Psukim 8 through 11 is the fall of the evil and the uplifting of those who are righteous. If there is a common theme which weaves its way throughout this entire chapter of Tehillim, it is the notion of using Lashon Hara to hurt people. We're going to see it's referring to a very specific historical event that anyone who's ever studied Sefer Shmuel Aleph will be familiar with. But the clear narrative of this chapter of Tehillim is using Lashon Hara to hurt people, the negative effects of slander, those who think they are untouchable, those who think that they are above the letter of the law, so to speak, who use language as a bullet to harm people. And we'll see exactly what case we are talking about there. And again, that's really the message that this chapter wants to communicate to us. So in respect, it is a very historical chapter of Tehillim, and it is a very specific concept. Sometimes, we have like different concepts in different psukim. This has clearly one specific message that is supposed to be related to us throughout our study of the entire chapter. Before we get into the chapter of Tehillim itself, let's discuss some of the historical context of this parak in Tehillim. And it is really Sefer Shmuel Aleph, Prakim Chaf Aleph and Chaf Bet. David HaMelech, of course, is on the run from Shaul, and we're going to get a little bit to where he comes to at the end, but he comes to the city called Nov. Achimelech, who is this king of the city of Nov, gives him bread, gives him a sword, gives him a weapon, ends up being the weapon of Goliath, and he sends David HaMelech on his way. Again, and if you have not studied Sefer Shmuel Aleph recently, I highly recommend pausing this year right now, or coming back to this year right now, or right after this year, opening up a Sefer of Tanakh, opening up an English Sefer Shmuel Aleph, and reviewing these chapters of Tehillim. David HaMelech comes to Achimelech, and he asks for bread, and he asks for a sword. Now, unbeknownst to David HaMelech at that time, there is someone who is watching this encounter. Says the pasuk chet in parak Chaf Aleph, Visham ish me'avdei Shaul. There was a person who was a servant of Shaul, Bayomahu, Natsar lifnei Adonai, who is lingering there, who is standing there. And who is it? Ushmo Doeg Ha'adomi Abir Haroim Asher LeShaul. And who was it? It was Doeg the Edomi, who is the chief of Shaul's shepherds. Now we have to exactly see, what does that mean that he was the chief of Shaul's shepherds? How is that significant to us here? All you have to do is think about who some other shepherds are throughout Jewish history. Obviously, shepherds are classically very righteous people, very righteous individuals, and we'll see in a little bit that is exactly who Doeg was. Doeg is not a bad person starting off. Doeg is the Beis Din, as Chazal are going to point out. That's what they say when it means that he's a shepherd. It means that he was the head of the Beis Din. He was a big Talmud Chacham. When it refers to him as Doeg Ha'adomi, it is referring to the geographic location where he is settling. Okay, so that's the story. David HaMelech is on the run. He comes to a city. He asks Achimelech for some bread. Then subsequent to that, Vayomer David LaAchimelech, Ve'ein Yesh po tachas yadcha chanis o cherev. Is there a sword here? Ki gam charbi vegam kelai lo lakachti biadi. Right, I was on the run. I didn't even have a sword with me. Perhaps you have something. Vayomer hakohen cherev Goliath haplishti ashiri kisa ba'emek. Right, the sword of Goliath, who you yourself killed. Hine hiluta basimla It is wrapped up in a cloth, right? Imata tikach lecha kach ki ein acheres zulasa bazeh, happens to be, says Achimelech, it's the only sword I have. Take it with you and be on your way. And so David HaMelech has this encounter with Achimelech. He doesn't think anyone is noticing, but of course, Doeg is watching the entire episode play out. In the 22nd chapter, right after Perek Chaf Bet, David HaMelech once again is on the run, and the pasuk tells us, "Vayishma Shaul ki no da David v'anasher ishi asher ito." Shaul hears that David has been discovered. V'Shaul yoshe begiva tachas ha'eshel berama b'chanito biyado v'chol avadav nitzavim alav. Like Shaul, is standing there with a spear. All of his servants are standing around him. And what does he say? He says, how could you have given? Gam lekulchem yitain ben yishai sadotu chramim lekulchem yasim sarei alafim sarei meot. In other words, why are you giving cover to David HaMelech? You're letting him stay here. You have to uproot him. You have to get rid of him. Pasuk Tes Perek Chavbet, chapter 22, verse 9. Vayan Doeg Ha'adomi. Doeg the Adomi answers, V'hu nitzav alavdei Shaul. He's standing right next to Shaul. Vayomar, Ra'isi es ben Yishai bo navo el Achimelech ben Achitov. I heard that David HaMelech had come to Achimelech in the city of Nov. Vayisha lo ba'Adonai v'tseida natan lo. And Achimelech inquired from the Urim v'Tumim, right? And he gave to him, where am I? Vayisha lo ba'Adonai v'tseida natan lo. He gave him bread. Ve'ischerev Goliath haplishti nasan lo. And Achimelech also gave him the cherev of Goliath. It's important to reference that here in Doeg's representation of the conversation, he says that it was Achimelech who inquired of Hashem, and therefore, as a result of Achimelech, as a result of the Urim V'Tumim, Achimelech was able to give food and a sword to David. Vayishlach HaMelech likroas Achimelech. Shaul calls for Achimelech, says, "What are you doing?" Kills him, kills the entire city of Nov. And so in chapter 22, it says that Shaul hears that David has been spotted. Shaul says to his servants, how could you do this against me? How could you be in cahoots with David against me? Doeg speaks up and says, I am a faithful servant to you, Shaul. David HaMelech has been seen. He's in the city of Nov with Achimelech. They have betrayed you. Shaul calls Achimelech in. As a punishment for them harboring David HaMelech, Shaul massacres the entire city of Nov as a result of the Lashon Hara that Doeg shared. That is the background to this chapter of Tehillim. And so with that, here we go. Lam Natseach, Pasuk Aleph, La Maskil LeDavid. Again, anytime you see the word Maskil, it means, as Rav Hirsch points out, that this is a message that David wants to give to us. This is instructive, right? Some chapters of Tehillim are inspirational. This chapter of Tehillim is instructive. And what is the instruction about it? Bebo Doeg Ha'adomi Vayaged L'Shaul Vayomer Lo Bo David El Beis Achimelech. What are we talking about here? When Doeg from Edomi came, he informed Shaul. And what did he tell him? David has come to Achimelech's house. Ma tishalel bara Gibor. David HaMelech says, why you, Doeg, do you boast of your evil? Chesed el kol hayom, when you know that the kindness of Hashem never ceases. In other words, why are you betraying God? Why are you boasting of your evil? You're proclaiming to Shaul in such an overt way the Lashon Hara about me, when you yourself know that this is not the way that Hashem operates, that Chesed el kol hayom, that Hashem's faithfulness is all day long. Havos tachshov l'shonecha, right? Your tongue is deceitful. Ketar milutash osei rimiyah. It's like a sharpened razor, which is deceitful, which is treacherous against those that it speaks. Again, we're speaking about the negative impact, the negative consequences of Doeg's speech against David HaMelech. Ahafta, Pasuk 5, Ahafta ro ra to mitov sheker Midaber tzedek sela. You prefer evil to good. You lie instead of speaking truthfully. Again, it's all about the way that we speak. It's about the consequences of Doeg's words. Ahafta, kol divrei bala lashon mirma. You have loved. The bala means like swallowing up, the way that your language swallows up. As we've spoken about in the past, great book, The 5 Love Languages. Gary Chapman, he talks about how words can either be bullets or words can be seeds, right? A word can be a seed. The way I speak about someone can build them up. It can build their confidence. It can give them the courage to persevere. Words can be seeds. It can plant something within a person, which can flourish and blossom and ultimately create something beautiful. On the other hand, words can also be bullets. It can destroy. It can bring someone down. That is Pasuk 6, Pasuk Vav, Ahafta, Kol Divrei Bala, Lashon Mirma. Your love of pernicious words, Lashon Mirma, again, your treacherous, your deceitful way of speaking about other people. Pasuk 7, Gam El Yitatzcha Lanetzach, Yachtecha V'yisachecha Me'ohel, V'shereshcha Me'eretz Chaim Sela. What is Hashem going to do to you? Hashem is going to tear you down. Hashem is going to break you. Hashem is going to uproot you. V'sherashcha me'eretz chaim. He's going to uproot you from the Eretz Chaim. What's the land of the living? We are not obviously talking about this world, but says the Malbim, who avud nishmaso v'sharsho me'eretz chaim me'elyona. Right? It's going to uproot you from the land of the living. What are we talking about? Eretz Chaim is, of course, Olam Haba. V'yiru tzadikim v'yira'u. The righteous are going to see this and they're going to fear it. They're going to be awestruck. Ve'alav yischaku, and they're going to laugh at you. They're going to laugh at your downfall. You, Doeg, who thought you were powerful. You, Doeg, who used words to destroy and to create massacre. You, Doeg, who think you are so strong and wealthy and indestructible. Alav yischaku. All of these tzaddikim are going to laugh at you. They're going to poke fun at you, because they're going to realize ultimately that Hashem is going to come to my defense. Hine hagever lo yasim Elohim ma'uzo, v'yivtach berov ashro, ya'oz bahavaso. Right here is a person, lo yasim Elohim ma'uzo, who did not make Hashem his refuge, who did not put his faith in Hashem. Rather, what does this person put his faith in? V'yivtach berov ashro. The person put his trust in his great wealth. He put his trust in his money, in his power, in his capabilities, right? Instead of putting his faith in Hashem. Ya'oz bahavoso. He relied on his havoso. It's a very strange word. Havoso really means like your self-confidence. I saw an essay by Lubavitch Rebbe where he says havoso means those things, anything in my life which creates a mirage of my self-capability, of my power, of my ability to do it on my own. Anytime I have something in my life that gives me that confidence, that misplaced confidence, that is ya'oz bahavoso. I'm relying on the follies of this world. I think that my house and my car and my capabilities and my strength and my power are all going to protect me. No. Right? Hine hagever lo yasim Elohim ba'ozo. He doesn't make Hashem his refuge. He doesn't put his faith in Hashem. Rather, what does he trust? He puts his faith in wealth. He puts his faith in things that are ephemeral, in his power, in his capabilities, not realizing that ultimately all of his strength and all of his power and all of his might comes from Hashem. Says David HaMelech, V'ani kezayis ranan bebeis Elohim. I'm like an olive tree, right? But a thriving olive tree. Batachti bechesed Elohim olam va'ed. And who do I place my faith in? I place my faith in none other than Hashem, right? None other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Odcha leolam ki asisa. I will praise Hashem forever because of the way He has acted on my behalf. Ve'akaveh shimcha ki tov neged chasidecha. And I declare your name, right? Ve'akaveh shimcha. I yearn for your name. Kitov neged chasidecha, because only goodness and kindness comes from to you, to your faithful ones. So as you saw very quickly, again, we did a very quick perusal of this chapter, but one of the things that you see very quickly and immediately is that this is really a diatribe against Doeg, where David HaMelech says, Doeg, you put your faith in your wealth, in your power. You think that if you cozy up to Shaul, that's going to protect you. None of that is going to protect you. Ultimately, the only thing that's going to protect you is your faith in Hashem. And so I'll just point out a few highlights from this parak. Number one, we say in Pasuk Gimel, Mati Salel Bara Gibor, Chesed El Kol Yom. Right? Why do you praise the Rag, the Gibor, all of the evil? Right? When God's kindness exists all day. What David HaMelech essentially is saying is, you, Doeg, you, the evil one, why are you so proud of the evil that you've done? Right? Sometimes a person does something wrong. And even worse than that is they boast about what they've done wrong. And you look at the guy, you say, fool, it's bad enough that you do something wrong, but you got to boast about it. You got to put it on social media. You got to talk about it, right? Don't be so, if you're going to do something wrong, do it in quiet, do it in confidence. You'll notice the word gibor here, right? The strong one. What does that mean? What is that a reference to? So says Rashi, Vatispaer bara'a she'asisa, you elevated yourself because of the wickedness that you do. Atah hagibor batorah. Says Rashi, what is the gibor? It means that you were a Talmud Chacham. You should have known better. You're an Av Beis Din, and yet you created such evil. You created such an evil, horrific, pernicious act, right? But the kindness of Hashem is everlasting. And at the end of the day, the people that you seek to attack, right, Hashem will protect. Hashem is going to protect the persecuted. Says Rashi, Chesed El Kol Hayom, right, that the kindness of Hashem is all day. Lahatzil es hanirdaf al yadcha. Hashem is going to protect the persecuted. Hashem is going to protect your victims, right? That is how Rashi reads Pasuk Gimel. Pasuk Zayin, Ki El Yitatzcha, the notion that Hashem is going to destroy you and uproot you. So again, the Meforshim point out that not only are you going to be killed, but you're going to lose your olam haba. You're going to be uprooted, v'sherashcha me'eretz chaim. You're going to be uprooted from olam haba. When we talk about speech, when we talk about the nefarious impact of speech, it's important to remember that speech lasts far longer than the words that we say, right? Once something comes out of the box, it's out there in the world to digest and to be spread like a cancer in society. That is exactly, I think, what we're talking about here. In other words, because of what you said, there's an everlasting impact of it. Lubavitch Rebbe in that essay writes, it's a chil Hashem. It's a desecration of Hashem, because not only that you said that, but it's that it continues on for generations to come. And so whereas Doeg puts his trust in his wealth, essentially what David HaMelech is saying is at the end of the day, right, you're going to lose your olam haba. David HaMelech says, you put your faith in your wealth, I put my faith in Hashem. I put my trust in Hashem. Of course, how does the story end? So at the beginning of Shmuel Beis, someone comes to David HaMelech and says that they killed Shaul. David is very upset about that and puts the person to death. Says Chazal, who is the person at the beginning of Shmuel Beis who comes before David HaMelech and say that they killed Shaul? Chazal say that is none other than Doeg. Why is that significant? Because what it means is that Doeg is an opportunist, right? When the opportunity presents itself to cozy himself up to Shaul and to throw David under the bus, Doeg's all over it. When Doeg sees that the tides have turned, that David HaMelech put his faith in Hashem, that he's ultimately going to be able to succeed and persevere, so now he gets rid of Shaul and he tries to put his faith, he tries to cozy up to David HaMelech. David HaMelech says, that's not the type of guy I am. Right? That's not the person I want. David HaMelech puts him to death because he recognizes the treacherous nature of Doeg, that Doeg is the ultimate opportunist. And therefore he says, there's no place for you in the world. People who are hypocritical, people who say one thing but do another thing, people who try to endear themselves to someone in front of their face, but behind the scenes do the exact opposite. The Malbim makes this point because the Malbim says, maybe you'll say that Doeg was just right. Shaul was the king. Shaul issued an edict. So Doeg felt the need to go along with it. David is the king. Maybe kill Shaul, right? It says the Malbim don't buy into that narrative whatsoever. The Malbim says, Ba David el Beis Achimelech, right? So the Malbim says, Kvar biarti, shebezeh haya taloi ikar hamalshinus, This is the exact slanderous nature of what Doeg says. Ki be'emes ba David el Beis Hashem lo el Beis Achimelech. David HaMelech came to the Beis Hashem. He didn't come to Achimelech. It wasn't Achimelech who consulted the Urim V'Tumim. It was David who does that. But Doeg switches the language. V'Doeg Shama. Doeg heard. She David Amar Shaholech B'Shlichus HaMelech. Right? Doeg heard that David said that he was going at the behest of the king. V'Shahu Ra'av. That he was starving. V'Shesha'ol B'Urim V'Tumim. And that he was inquiring of the Urim V'Tumim. V'lo dia l'kohen ikar she'laso. V'amro she'amelech siva l'halim davar. V'lo bikesh cherev Goliath's klal rak cherev stam. Right, David HaMelech never asked for Goliath's sword. He asked for a sword. V'rak mimnei shelo haya biyado cherev acheres lakach cherev Goliath. There was no other sword. And so Achimelech gives him the cherev of Goliath. Mikol zeh mevuar. She'akohen asazos betum levavo v'nikiyon kapo. Achimelech was acting with such pure intentions. There wasn't a bad bone in Achimelech's body. Virak Doeg shina hadvarim. Doeg modifies the report. Doeg changes the language in order to destroy Achimelech and to destroy David HaMelech. Why do we then memorialize this event for eternity? Why do we capture this egregious sin of Doeg and perpetuate its memory by having a whole chapter of Tehillim about it? Because I think, again, what David HaMelech is lamenting is the way we use speech. I think the way David HaMelech is lamenting people who use language to bring people down, to be bullets instead of being seeds. And ultimately, I think what David HaMelech is lamenting is someone who is not what the Gemara calls Tocho Kibaro. Tocho Kibaro means that I am who I say I am. The same Phil Moskowitz you get now is the Phil Moskowitz that I am at home, the same Phil Moskowitz that I get on vacation. I don't speak one way in front of you and speak another way when the camera's off. At least I try to. Obviously, I'm not perfect, but that's what I aspire to. David HaMelech is saying, don't be like Doeg, speaking one way in front of a person in a completely other way when the person is not there. That, to me, is the main theme of what this chapter is about. Obviously, and this was a sheer coincidence how this happened, but obviously, I could not have thought of a better chapter of Tehillim to study the Shabbos before Parshas Shlach, right? What is Parshas Shlach, if not the negative consequences of language? Spies come back, speak negatively about the land of Israel, and what happens? The people say, we don't want to go. People say, this isn't for us. Klal Yisrael is punished in a horrific fashion. A generation dies in the desert. They're not allowed to go into the land of Israel. We're punished for generations to come, the 9th of Av. Everything is from that moment, all because the Meraglim misused their power of speech. Doeg and the Meraglim, same idea, something to think about this Shabbos. The last idea I want to share with you is really a wild idea. I throw it out there as food for thought. You can tell me what you think of it. If you like it, you don't like it. If you do like it, submit your feedback to me. You always know my email address, rpm@brsonline.org. I welcome any feedback, but I want to share a wild idea with you. It's a pasuk from Parshas Vayeshev, and it's a story that so many of us skip over. It's Yehuda and Tamar. But in the introduction to that story, the pasuk says, Vayhi, Ba'isahi, Vayered Yehuda meis echav, vayet ad ish adulami ushmo chira. Yehuda finds himself in a depressed situation, right? He suggests the brothers sell Yosef. Yehuda separates from the rest of his brothers. He literally goes down, right? Vayered Yehuda, he suffers some lessened status. Yehuda gets married. 2 oldest sons die. Then things go from bad to worse. His wife dies. He's reluctant to marry off a 3rd son. Tended to marry Tamar out of fear, right? And what happens? The Torah records story of Yehuda and Tamar, island unto himself, ... I've read this pasuk a million times, and now I want to read it again to you, right? Vayet ad ish adulami ushmo chira. After leaving his brothers, he comes to an ish adulami, a person from Adulam, whose name is Chira. Now, I never noticed Chira's presence, right? We don't know who Chira was. We don't know who he's from. We don't know anything about him, right? But all the Meforshim, by the way, wonder, why are we being told about Chira? But what's even more interesting is that when Yehuda falls to his lowest state, again, this Parshas Vayeshev, Chira makes another appearance. Vayirbu hayamim, vatamas bat shua, eshes Yehuda, vayinachem Yehuda, Yehuda is comforted, vayal al gozeze sono, hu, v'chira re'ehu adulami timnasa. Right? Chira, his friend. This time, the Torah doesn't simply refer to him by his name, Chira, and he's not just Chira hadulami, but he's Chira re'ehu. He's a friend, right? What happens immediately afterwards? Tamar and Yehuda give birth, Peretz, progenitor of David HaMelech, future messianic king. What's interesting is that the first time the word for friend appears in the Torah is in the context of the birth of Mashiach, right? Friendship is the key to bringing Mashiach. It's an amazing idea. Now, what's amazing to me is where does David find himself in the story of Shmuel Aleph? Vayelech David Misham, Vayimalet el Ma'arat Adulam. David HaMelech is a fugitive running for his life from a powerful king. He escapes and runs into a hiding place. Right? David HaMelech is deserted. He's lonely. He's petrified, not knowing where to turn for help. And yet the Navi tells us that where does he run to? A place, Adulam. Two places of Adulam in the Torah, right? David HaMelech there is where he gets camaraderie, he gets assistance, he gets companionship. David running away, thinking that he was all alone. And all of a sudden, he has his friends and his family running towards him to help him in Adulam. And so you have Adulam in Parshas Vayeshev, the story of Yehuda and Tamar. You have Adulam in our story of David HaMelech, two very connected storylines because they're both having to do with David HaMelech, Mashiach, etc. David's friends and family gather in Adulam to help him during a dark time. Adulam helps Yehuda in his darkest of time. And in both cases, it's the friendships either of Adulam or in Adulam to Yehuda and David, obviously the same link in the same chain, that are inextricably linked to the birth of Mashiach himself. I think that's an amazing idea. Amazing idea. Amazing chesed, right? Because what we're talking about, when we talk about Doeg was the ultimate opportunist, as we said. You couldn't trust Doeg. You couldn't trust anything he said, because at the end of the day, you were afraid that he was going to stab you in the back. That's not a real friend. A real friend is when they're there for you in your darkest of times. They're there for you in your moment of adversity to help you overcome that. That is Adulam. That is what friendship is all about. And so I don't think it's an accident that David finds himself in Adulam and that Doeg is the foil to that. Doeg is the antithesis of friendship. Doeg is the opportunist. No one wants an opportunist as a friend. You can't trust that person. You move in the wrong way, he's going to stab you in the back. David HaMelech, what he's telling us is not just about language, but I believe it's about friendship. It's about being there for another person through thick and through thin. It's about being there for a person in their moment of difficulty, in their moment of adversity. That is what a real friend is. Yehuda had that with Chira in Adulam. David HaMelech has that in Adulam as well. And that's what David HaMelech, Doeg is the foil to that. David HaMelech is ultimately showing us what it means to be a real friend, not just to be opportunist, not just to be a bandwagon type of friend where you're on one moment, you're off the next, but rather to be there for a person in their moment of crisis and their moment of need. So that is chapter 52 of Tehillim. I think it's very relevant for the Parsha, the Shabbos. I think it has many important lessons for us about the way we use speech, about the type of friends we are, whether we're a fair weather friend, whether we're an opportunist friend, or whether we're a legit. What does it mean to be a friend of someone? And I think those are the conversations that emerge from this beautiful chapter 52 of Tehillim. I wish everyone a beautiful, meaningful week. We are back here tomorrow morning, 3 ideas in